sometimes there just isn't that much to say about a game. I actually had some high hopes going into Comic Circus. Yeah, it was a takeoff on an old arcade game, but I thought it was going to be one of those situations where Epoch expanded on the concept. We've seen them do that a few times already, and the result has been pretty good, though not something that would necessarily generate a lot of sales in 1985. But Comic Circus doesn't add a whole lot to the formula that it's borrowing, and so it feels really shallow and backward. The obvious inspiration for Comic Circus is the arcade game Circus, which was essentially a breakout variant where you had to keep bouncing someone up on a seesaw. There were a surprising number of imitators of that particular breakout variant in the early 80s. Games where you kept having to bounce someone back up to hit targets scrolling above them. Epoch's entry into this weirdly large genre is all about clowns who hate birds. They hate those birds so much. The clowns actually have names. Toby is player 1, Lucky is player 2, Jimmy is the bouncy clown who's stuck between them, and the Mock brothers are trapeze artists. But beyond that, there isn't a story. Comic Circus has 3 stages, and they all have the same goal: get rid of all the birds. The birds will be hanging out near the top of the tent, although sometimes one of them will come swooping down, moving back and forth in front of you. To take out a bird, you've got to get a clown into them. On the first 2 stages, this is entirely handled by bouncing them up and hopefully intercepting a bird. On the last stage, it gets a bit more complicated. Here, one clown is getting tossed back and forth by the trapeze artist, and if you miss, then you have to bounce him back up. And while some birds will go low enough that you can catch them with the bounce, 2 of them will always stay high, and the only way to catch them is by performing a trapeze toss. On the first stage, the only controls are left and right with the joystick. You're using a seesaw here, and Comic Circus actually implemented some rudimentary physics. The further a clown comes down, the further the next one goes back up. And the further out on the teeter-totter the clown lands, the more force there is to launch the next one. That said, you can't really aim the clowns. You're just going to have to rely on bouncing until you reach all the birds. If you clear away the balloons at the top of the screen, you can reach the tightrope above it, and walk along that for a few moments. Once all of the birds have been knocked out, you'll get bonus points for any remaining balloons, and if you were completely out of balloons, then you get bonus points for a full line of balloons. Then it's on to stage 2, where you're using a trampoline. And the principles are exactly the same here, except you have to land in the dead middle to get a higher bounce. Something special about the first 2 stages is that when you completely clear out the balloons, a unicycle will appear dangling from the tightrope, and if you catch onto that, it initiates a bonus mode where the crowd is throwing out bags of money. The birds also sometimes drop bags of money, and these are just bonus points. The third stage is where the controls get a little bit more complicated, because now you're actually using the buttons. And the buttons make the clown that's in the air jump. The trapeze artist will automatically catch whoever is up in the air if they're in the correct spot, so you don't have to worry about that, just timing the transfer between the 2. And that's what you need to know so that you can play the game, but there is an additional step here. There are 2 different game modes, Game A and Game B, and Mode B is for 2 or 4 players. You can also hit enter to change the difficulty, but that just speeds the game up a little bit. Everything I've been talking about is Mode A. The complication for Mode B is that you have to use teamwork. Each player is controlling one clown. So with the seesaw, one person is on the ground moving it around, and then when the other lands on it, they're in control while the other player is flipping through the air. The second stage is where it gets really complicated, because if one player pulls away from the trampoline, it drops to the ground. You have to act in perfect unison in order to get it around. And I do mean perfect. Really, the solution is for the person who's on the opposite side of the direction you want to go to start moving first, but you're going to drop that trampoline a lot. Stage 3 winds up being much easier this way, because only one player is controlling the bouncer, while the other is controlling the clown in the air. The player with the aerial clown uses the jump button and nothing else. So it's also a little bit more boring. And that really is all there is to Comic Circus. And once again, with an Epoch game, it really does feel like a very early arcade game. Something maybe 1980-ish. It's not a bad game by any stretch. It does its thing very well. It's just that what you see is what you get here. Play for 15 minutes and you'll have seen everything the game is going to give you. There aren't any real strategies for you to learn or master. You'll figure out everything you can do very quickly. There's just not enough happening for Comic Circus to have any staying power.